my friend gives me this LSD, and I had been doing some research around, what does a sacred intentional ceremony that you create yourself look like. And so I take about 150, 200 micrograms, which is a heroic dose. It's a dose that's going to take you deep, and put my face mask on, laid in my bed, and had this experience of dying and being reborn, and dying and being reborn. That was, it was a deeper ego death than I have ever had in my life.
Welcome to Tiny Table Talks with Tay-Tay.
Woo! And now we talk like this. We're sitting at a tiny table with my brother, Nathaniel, and this is going to be the duration of this podcast. We're going to speak in these voices.
No, I'm just playing. That would be annoying. So before we dive into this episode, Nate, you are a repeat guest on the Captain's Lifestyle podcast, right? You were episode 150, title A Tale of Finding Purpose Through Psychedelics. So if you haven't already listened to that episode to get a background on Nate, I encourage you to do so, because we're going to skip the background and go into microdosing today and the holistic benefits of using plant medicine to your advantage, because Nate guides entrepreneurs in getting unstuck and tapping into their full creative potential through plant medicine and breathwork, which we're going to be talking about today. And before we do that, I'm going to take a shot of Ketone IQ.
And I just want to pause you, Taylor, because you didn't introduce your balls.
And my balls.
All right.
Those of you who have seen the previous episodes will get that reference.
Inside
Those of you who are new
reference.
are like, what the fuck's happening? Oh yeah, we were recording this live at the Immersion, and we've got a live audience here. Yep.
Hey.
Sweet. All right, now let's get high on our own supply of ketones, which don't actually get you high, by the way. I like to just twist and rip.
I was having challenges because I just put some jojoba oil on my face. Cheers.
Cheers. Down the hatch.
What you put into your body today is the foundation for who you become tomorrow. That's why I fuel with Ketone IQ from HVMN. They're redefining the limits of human performance, metabolism, and longevity. I use Ketone IQ before every podcast to keep my mind sharp and clear. Head over to hvmn.com and use code CaptainMorgan_20 to get yours today. Back to the show.
Oh man, that's good stuff. Shout out to Ketone IQ for being a sponsor of this podcast. Ketones provide an elevated state of mental clarity, physical endurance, and also sustained energy. So these guys are fucking great. Use code CaptainMorgan_20 to get the hookup.
Good stuff.
All right. Nate, I want to start with you giving the LSD story of how you got into this. I know we talked about that on the first episode, but just to give context for people, let's bring it back to that.
It's a great entryway because it is my hero's journey. Back in 2020, where we collectively experienced this initiation, I was living in Denver working for the Department of Homeland Security. Mm-hmm. FEMA, which you're giggling because looking at me now, it's such a major shift. And I had drank the Kool-Aid. I was bought into like, this is going to be my life. I'm going to pursue a career working for this agency. There's so much security, the pension, the ego around.
And I would like to put security in air quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely. So security in the sense that I am giving my energy to this system for perceived security.
Yes.
And the trade-off was a deep one in which I was giving away a lot of my power. And so as the pandemic hit, FEMA ended up being put in the role of the lead agency in the federal government responsible for doing all of the acquiring PPE from overseas and the, handling the vaccinations and everything. So with that, my workload just became so incredibly huge, and I was managing a team of one other person and was just in this space of anxiety and fear of like, not only what is going to happen for myself in this like unmanageable workload, but what's going to happen more broadly in the world. And so summer of 2020, good friend of mine gives me some LSD, and I had experienced psychedelics earlier back in 2015 when I was living in Europe, had done a large dose of mushrooms and had a really profound experience. But since starting to work for the federal government, had not, because it's prohibited and you be fired on the spot if they find out, and all of these stories that they tell you. And so my friend gives me this LSD, and I had been doing some research around, what does a sacred intentional ceremony that you create yourself look like. And so I find this album called Music for Mushrooms by East Forest. And I was like, mushrooms, LSD, they're both psychedelics along this similar vein. So I create my intention, which was to see the blind spots in my life that I wasn't present to. And then, take about 150, 200 micrograms, which is a heroic dose. It's a dose that's going to take you deep, and put my face mask on, laid in my bed, and had this experience of dying and being reborn, and dying and being reborn. That was, it was a deeper ego death than I have ever had in my life. In that, I come out of this experience with some deaths being more challenging, some deaths being easier to move through. And I pull myself out of bed, and I go and stand in front of the mirror, and I see myself on this trajectory that I am on as this 80-year-old man looking back at me in the mirror, living the life that my current path is on. And it's one of joylessness. It's one of resentment towards myself. It's one of self-loathing. And I see that in this version of me's eyes. And at that point, I didn't know what to do with it. I was just in this deep state of fear, and like all my face and reality is melting and shifting and doing these different things, which is a part of the hallucinatory effect of LSD and more broadly serotonergic psychedelics. And so I go for a walk down in the park right near my house, and am slowly starting to come down and to moderate my system and come into the awareness that, my life path is not what I want it to be, and that I want to serve people. I want to serve people directly, and I want to support them in their healing. And in this awareness, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, I had the experience, I journal on it, I unpack it, I do all the things that you're supposed to do to integrate based on what I understood integration was at that time. And I was listening to Paul Chek's podcast and hear him talk about the Chek Academy. And I was like, I could be a coach. I could be a great coach. And so I do the first year of the Chek Academy. I'd also been listening to Mark England and was like, I love words. I love language. Be a really great language coach. And so I begin to find these different modalities that by, the end of 2021 was in this space of like, wow, I am building a skill set and am ready to take that step. And that was right around there. We're pushing the vaccination on the Department of Homeland Security employees. And so I submitted my religious exemption, and it was getting all of this pushback, and just reached this point where I was like, you know what, I'm done. And so I gave my boss my month notice that I was going to be leaving, and left. And since then, I spent all of last year living nomadically out of my car with my dog, and that has been more broadly my journey of coming to learn. And so after I had that massive dose of LSD, or larger dose of LSD, I started microdosing. And that anchored me into the shifts in behavior that I wanted to take, that supported the identity of becoming someone who serves people and who serves my community in their healing. And through microdosing and through the process that I cobbled together through different resources and refined in my own practice that I now coach, was able to put something together that is supportive both of habit change, but also of doing the deeper healing of trauma. And in clearing the trauma, clearing the energy where trauma is held in the body, creating the potential for a brighter vision to be created in somebody's life through the use of psychedelics, both microdosing and macrodosing.
So you help entrepreneurs get unstuck. Do you talk about this process that you went through, your experience of how if they're not enjoying what they're doing, like how to move past that, how to get unstuck?
Yeah. I mean, it's clearing limiting stories that you require this quote unquote safety, or you require this external thing for you to feel comfortable, versus listening to your internal wisdom, listening to your intuition, which is a practice. It's a practice. As we learn to figure out what it feels like to learn to our intuition, we're able to see more clearly what is in alignment and what is out of alignment, just in a moment's, like the gut feeling or the heart feeling, or feeling your intuitive center. Like all of our chakras tap us into a different aspect of our intuitive understanding of where we're going and why and how we can bring ourselves back into a truer sense of self.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from guys as well. They're working a job that they don't love, but they have this self-limiting belief that they can't quit, right? Like they have to keep doing this for some period of time, which in some cases could absolutely be true depending on circumstance. But like what I always say in working with Pat, this is one of the things that we talked about on our first coaching calls. He was optimizing his nutrition, his workouts, everything else. But I was like, hey, if you're not happy with your 9 to 5, like if you're not stoked about it, what you can only get so far, right? So what are some of the common excuses that you hear from these guys who are working the job that they don't like and are reluctant to move past that?
To be honest, at this point, my clients don't really bring me excuses.
Oh, they're ready.
They know what I'm going to bring to them, because it is a lot of compassion. Like I understand that people may not be ready to just blow up their entire life and shift if they've got a wife and kids and a mortgage payment. So understanding what you do have ownership over more broadly, but also in a given day or in a given hour or moment, that's really what's most powerful. Because, I can tell someone, quit your job and start doing something you love, but without clearing the deeper area, like energy, literal energy in their body that's holding them where they are, holding them stuck, then they can start taking that action, but it doesn't necessarily begin to align with their identity and it doesn't stick. So when we combine this process through breath work, through doing somatic healing work and ancestral healing work and doing vision casting and getting clear on what a person's 10-year vision is, it creates this holistic picture of moving away from what you don't want towards what you do want, which it's hard to have an excuse while you're in that shift, because it all comes back to bringing yourself back to presence. And in presence, there is no excuse.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ways to protect myself from EMFs is swimming in the ocean. And even when I can't, I'm still protected with my Aries Tech LifeTune Flex. It protects me from the oxidative stress caused by electromagnetic radiation that can cause things like headaches, fatigue, and trouble sleeping. To get yours, head to ariestech.com, use code Captain Morgan. That's ariestech.com, use code Captain Morgan. All right, back to the show.
So I imagine you just covered some of the things that of how you do this, and I do something very similar in my work with the Captain's Lifestyle. Like, they know that they're not happy with where they're at, but they're still unsure of where it is that they want to go. So that vision casting is profound. My process is defining your MVVP, your mission, vision, values, and purpose. And that acts as like your treasure map. Like, this is where you're going. This is your North Star. So what are some of the techniques that you use to help guide them through uncertainty? Because, right, if they know that they're not happy where they are, but they don't have that vision for where they want to go, that's a very uncertain and scary leap to make. Right. So walk us through that process.
Sure. So it starts with getting people understanding of the roots of their trauma. So we all have different, I like to base it on the 5 personality patterns of Stephen Kessler, who talks about the different stages between 0 and 7 that we experienced a need and then reached out for help and then didn't have that need supported and then developed a coping pattern around that. And so that is like the actual scientific manifestation of ancestral trauma. So giving people awareness around what their ancestral trauma is and how it's showing up in their life, their work, their relationships, that's the start. Helping people understand themselves and where they're not showing up for their highest and greatest. And Stephen Kessler says we're either in pattern or we're in presence. And so noticing, and this comes with a somatic clearing coaching practice that I guide people through on many of our coaching sessions when people come in a feeling of stuckness or in a feeling of anxiety or depression or whatever they may be moving through in their week. We go into that because that is the easiest entryway into what is beneath that, the core wound of their psyche that is being triggered into the moment that is keeping them from seeing what that larger vision, larger path for their life is. So that's the start. Like, we start clearing all of that so that they can start to feel what it feels like to let go of some of the shit that they've been holding on to for such a long time. And then I like to take them through Dr. DeMartini's values quiz, where you look at how you're spending your time, how you're spending your money, your energy, and your time. And that can be such an eye-opener to see like what the gap is between what you want to be doing and what you are doing currently.
Yes.
And then I'll workshop with them, well, what are your guiding principles in life? What are the right and left bounds in like these? If I start going off in this direction, like one of mine is like, I operate in integrity with love and truth. And so if I find that, I'm not being truthful with this person for a specific reason, that is an entryway into self-inquiry. Like, why am I, lying to this person about this? What is both that coming from? What is the wound that's resulting from? And what is the impact of that? And that helps me realign into my path, my dharma. And so in helping people develop their guiding principles, we then give them a process of developing their 10-year vision and affirmations, like the because, the so that. Like I have a 20-acre farmstead, generating, $500,000 a year so that my family is secure and has clean air and natural food to eat and sustain them.
Mm-hmm.
And in creating the 10-year vision, which is a refinement process, it's not just one and done.
Yeah.
They make it and stop looking at it, but we revisit it and work backwards to, all right, well, what are actions? You've mapped your 10-year vision back to your 5-year goals, to your 1-year goals, to your 6-month goals and your 3-month goals. And then all right, this month, based on your 3-month goals, what are 5 things that can get you to that thing? What are key performance indicators, trackable, measurable things that you can be doing to get you towards those 3-month goals?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I just show up to the call and we'll check in with people. Like, how is that going? How are you doing with those? And with the understanding that we can't hold people accountable as coaches. People can hold themselves accountable, and we can show up to see whether or not they are holding themselves accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And if they aren't, there's an opportunity for us to be more in integrity as coaches in how we're showing up and in how we're being in integrity in coaching people.
Mm.
So my client's success, I take as a direct reflection of my own capacity to hold space and be in presence with my clients.
Mm. Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions is how do you hold clients accountable? Because once they've defined this vision, but their actions aren't aligning
Mm-hmm.
with what they say they want, what are some of the things like on the call that help either switch their mindset or help them realize like, hey, your actions are leading you down this path. If you say you want this, you're going to have to course correct.
Mm-hmm. So you want to be working out 3 times a week. You want to be going to the gym 3 times a week. Well, what happened this week that resulted in that? Like, oh, I had to do X, Y, and Z with my kids, and I got into a fight with my wife, and and I've just been feeling low energy. Like, well, what was the fight with your wife about? Oh, it was about the fact that, we're drifting apart and we're feeling less connected and And I was like, well, why, what is coming up when you tell me that? Where do you feel it in your body? What is the actual aspect of your holding pattern that you're in your body that is resulting in you not being able to hold space with your wife or communicate directly or do these things that facilitate, healthy dynamics in a loving partnership?
Mm.
And so rather than like, I need you to do this more and do better next time, it comes from a place of giving people grace to make mistakes, but also holding them accountable to the deeper place where the absence of themselves holding themselves accountable is coming from.
Do you suffer with stress, anxiety, trouble sleeping? If so, you could be part of the 80% of people who don't get enough magnesium in their diet. Most supplement brands use cheap, low-quality ingredients at ineffective doses. Bioptimizers goes all in on their formulations, combining 7 different forms of bioavailable magnesium. That's why I recommend Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers.
I want to bring it back to the ancestral trauma. So a lot of people who are stuck, that can be their own stories, but it can also come from their ancestors, correct? So how does one come to that realization that how they're currently struggling is due to a past pattern from their relatives?
So it's always both.
Okay.
Like, it's always your own pattern. Like, you have the responsibility and the ownership over your pattern. And if it's an aspect, and there are good and bad aspects that we inherit from our parents, through our grandparents, through our great-grandparents, through our great-great-grandparents, and all of the different intermingling family dynamics, that, it's not a matter of unpacking if it's this or this. It's more of like, how is this leading you to feel a particular way? And, it can be passed down from generation to generation as like a civilization wound. These wounds that we take on as projections of living in this society, which the majority of ancestral wounds, if not all ancestral wounds, are. So giving people a clear understanding of, oh, this is my pattern and this is something that I took on as a coping pattern, or this is something that I saw and then mirrored that is now something that I have the opportunity to unlearn so that I can learn something new.
How does plant medicine fit into that?
Plant medicine expands our aperture of awareness. So in expanding our aperture of awareness, it gives us the ability to be more present with what is, with what's in our mind, with what's in our body, and in connection with our spirit. So large doses, as I mentioned, my heroic dose of LSD that catapulted me onto this beautiful life journey that I'm on right now, it created an ego death. So psychedelics, particularly serotonergic psychedelics, which are psychedelics that operate along the 5-HT2A pathway, the serotonin pathway, which serotonin is responsible for our perception and our ability to think. And it's a cognitive neurotransmitter.
And mood, yes.
And mood, exactly. Yeah.
And sleep also.
Mood, sleep. I mean, serotonin is just it's such a huge neurotransmitter that it's responsible for so much that they're still very much unpacking what psychedelics actually do within serotonin production. But if you look at the molecules of psilocybin, of LSD, of DMT, those three in particular, they fit like lock and key to the serotonin pathway. So in operating along the serotonin pathway, they allow you to stimulate glutamate, which is responsible for supporting your cognition and your learning and your memory, as well as BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which, we just did some ice baths, we did some sauna. This BDNF supports our ability to strengthen neural networks that may be weakening, as well as to build new neural networks. Now, to get back to the ego death, we have what is called the default mode network, and it's interlinkages between our medial, our prefrontal, and our frontal cortex that is responsible for how we perceive the past and how we perceive the future. And psychologists believe that this is largely what makes up our ego. And so when we connect with plant medicines, when we connect with psychedelics, we are dampening the default mode network. And so in dampening the default mode network, we're able to quiet the thoughts of rumination, of getting into these thought loops that, may lead to depression or anxiety or put us in a space of contractive energy. And we can be present with what is. And so in that expanded space of awareness, we're able to be more in the moment. And there are all kinds of, depending on the dosages, you can feel more present or feel more creative. And it's all a matter of your own biology, body weight, how your body processes these medicines. But at large doses, when we engage with plant medicines in a sacred way, in a way that, allows us to connect with them in a space of safety, we are practicing dying. We're practicing our own death so that we are living a life of integrity, so that we're living a life that is in alignment with our soul, with spirit. And all of that to say that, that these are powerful medicines that allow us to connect more deeply with the universal nature of, how the natural world around us operates.
So what's the difference between, what would be the pros and cons versus large dose and
Mhm.
microdose? Like, what do you teach in your course? Is it only macrodoses, or do you work with microdosing?
So I have a microdosing mastery program that is focused around microdosing because I see microdosing as a more accessible way to tap people into the possibility of macrodosing, of having a heroic journey, because I believe that is how we change the world through psychedelics, by giving people the ability to be in connection with their own death. We have such a taboo around death and dying, and all of the industry around that, and shame and fear and disconnection from the actual death and dying process, that when we give ourselves the gift of dying before we die, we were able to see our life in a more clear way of what it is that is going to maximize our impact while we're here.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I do guide clients. I do facilitate ceremonies for clients in like 5, 6, 7 gram journeys. And my program itself focuses around microdosing because I like to give people an incremental step towards feeling comfortable going into that space, because not everybody is feeling called to just jump into a big ego dissolution space, because it can be really scary, and it should be scary because like these are medicines that are sacred and are meant to be honored because they're powerful.
Yeah.
And I have had friends who have used psychedelics in unintentional and neglectful of their own consciousness ways and have had psychotic breaks. They've gone on 6-month, complete disconnection from reality and having paranoid, illusions. And it was really scary to experience and support them through that. And all of that to say that these are, like I said, they're very powerful, and they are meant to be honored and received with intention.
You mentioned the power of dying before you die, which last year at the immersion, Leo Savage was here. He led us through a die before you die meditation that was very powerful for me. I'll speak from my own experience. I saw myself die, and I saw the higher version of myself talking to me. And I said to myself, hey, if you want all these things that you say that you want, you're on the right path. You just have to keep going. And that was a profound experience for me. So why are people afraid of dying? Does it go back to the uncertainty?
Yeah. It's the existential question of what happens after we die. And if people aren't living in connection with nature and the flow of nature, in which death and life and rebirth are a constant process, we've been separated from our true nature, which is living in connection with natural law. And in that, there is inculcated this fear, because that fear is a fear of disempowerment. It takes us away from understanding that we are in control of our life. And I see this fear of death as a byproduct of that, of giving away ownership, of being in connection.
Yeah.
So, that is one of many aspects that I think create the fear of death, but also the disconnection from our own spirituality, from the understanding that we are both a physical body, we are a mental body, and we're also a soul that exists beyond space and time, that is a part of the whole, everything, God, source consciousness, divinity, whatever you want to call it, that we are just a node of consciousness that exists at these 3 realms in connection with all, with infinity.
I imagine some of the fear around death relates to regret, because as you saw yourself when you were 80, continuing down that path that you were on, you would have regretted not switching paths, right? So I think a lot of it revolves around people who are not in alignment with, like you said, their true nature. So if they were to die, they wouldn't have fulfilled their purpose on this earth, right?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to be consuming a microdose of psilocybin today. Yes?
Mhm.
Okay. Why are we doing that? What is coming after the fact, and what can people expect? Or I don't want to put expectations of like it has to be this way, but what are some things that people can expect, for lack of a better word?
Yeah. So psilocybin is the grandfather medicine. Think about like what the ideal grandfather is like. You know, he's loving, like he doesn't have the same energy as your father, who can be overbearing or have that, whatever that masculine energy may present in your life. But the grandfather is direct. He can be stern at times, but he's also very unconditionally loving. And that is what I see in psilocybin, in its overall energy, in how the earth gives us this wisdom, this plant teacher, and the lessons that it provides. Practically, at low doses, we're taking about between 0.1 and 0.15 grams, which is the minimum effective dose, which is what I advise my clients to start with. Don't try to, push the bounds of having a hallucinatory effect. Like, start low. Start at, like, I can barely even feel it, which is what this dose is. And starting low, you're able to see how the medicine affects you, how you're able to engage with it. And so what people might feel, and we'll be going into an amazing workshop led by Chase and Dave, is heart opening. It connects you to your emotions. It gives you more presence for what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and how the flow between your thoughts and emotions may be ebbing and flowing. And in that awareness, it allows us to, it allows me in particular to clear what I'm going through, to be more present and release whatever grief or sadness or fear or resentment I may be attached to. And it can help us with different areas of learning, of habit change, of modulating our behavior a little bit more easily because of the increased BDNF and glutamate and these different areas of our brain that are subtly shifting in a way that it's just enough to create that extra little bit of push of motivation. Decreased procrastination is a big thing that I've noticed in my microdosing practice. And just feeling more myself, feeling more in myself when I find myself caught in my head, which I certainly did back in 2020, as I was preparing myself to leave my job and what that meant for my life. So those are just some of the things, and understanding that it's different for each person based on your neurology, your biology, and the set and setting, which is something that we haven't gotten into, but that's crucial. So
yeah, let's talk about that. So just to recap, what people may experience: a heightened sense of presence and openness, increase in serotonin, so a elevated mood, more connection to both themselves and what I've found is to nature and to each other, especially in this set and setting. Before we get into the importance of set and setting, are there any downsides to consuming a microdose? Like, is there anything that we should be concerned with?
So if you are an empathic person, you may, because you're the veil is thin, because you're in an expanded state of awareness, you can take on other people's energy, which is why set and setting are so important, because your mindset, we spent this morning in the ice bath and in the sauna and working out, getting our minds prepared to come into this space. And so making sure that you are in a good mindset to connect with the medicine And then also the setting, your external environment, making sure you're around people who you trust and who you feel good around, and who are you're surrounded by trees and grass and places that you can ground and connect with nature, because it does facilitate our ability to feel one with everything. But if we're just in a crowded city, it can be a disconnecting experience, because we're taking on that the vibration that our external environment is projecting onto us. So being very conscious of your external environment and your internal environment are huge, because at larger doses we then start to feel one with everything. We start to feel one with the trees and with the grass and with the wind, and we start to listen to the sound of water flowing by us and hearing it say things like, I love you, you are beautiful. All of these things that remind us that we, like I said, are a node of consciousness in the ocean of potential, of divine. And that's what I love about plant medicines. And it's been 4 months since I microdosed last. I actually had a macrodose. And the thing about microdosing is that it does not create dependency. It is non-addictive, and it's important that we do it intentionally, with the understanding that we aim to use the medicine to connect with an aspect of ourselves we would like to connect to absent the medicine. And so it is learning the practice of how to connect to that aspect of ourselves, building that muscle so that we're able to do it intrinsically, so that we're able to do it as an innate aspect of our practice without needing to microdose. So we microdose to not microdose eventually.
What's the optimal frequency for microdosing?
So there are different protocols. The one that I like is the Fadiman protocol. So that's 1 day on, 3 days off, 1 day on, 4 days off, or one day on, 2 days off, 1 day on, 3 days off. So twice a week, spaced out, and then planning your week around your microdosing, or having specific days in which you microdose. I like to do like a lower end microdose on a day that I'm doing some analytical work and planning out my day, so I don't have to think about, because it takes us out of our ability to do the analytical planning and puts us into a more of a creative space, so that we can think about things in a more non-linear way that we may not be able to think about in our regular everyday mind without the medicine. So 1 day the lower dose, and then 1 day on a higher dose where we can go out and spend time in the woods, where we can camp on the weekend, or go for a bike ride, or connect with a partner, or whatever that may be. So playing with the lower bound and starting low, and then slowly working your way up. I like to say 0.1 is, or even less than 0.1 is a great starting point. So 0.05, and then working your way up to like 0.4 grams, or 0.5, where you start to then have like some visual distortions, but it's also a really expansive place to connect to people who you care about, or to connect to nature. So that is one protocol that I've got the most experience with. The next primary protocol that is recommended is the Stamets stack. And the Stamets stack is 5 days a week, doing, again, like 0.1 to 0.4 grams, 5 days on, 2 days off, and combining mushrooms with lion's mane and niacin. And so lion's mane has the neurogenerative, neuroprotective effects.
Which we're drinking right now in Newtopia. It's a 50-to-1 concentration of lion's mane, which also helps increase BDNF.
Yeah.
Fantastic combination with psilocybin.
It is. And then the niacin is a vasodilator. So it allows the psilocybin and the lion's mane to go deeper into your brain and to spread throughout your body, and to have, like, it's a potentiator. So
I've got some vasodilating supplements here, so we can get that in too. So we'll get the lion's mane, the vasodilatory effect, and also combine it with the psilocybin.
And I invite people to play around and to be their own scientist, because what may work for one person, may not work for others. So those two are a good starting point based on how you want to engage with the medicine. And starting low, working your way slowly up to the upper bound of, you starting to get visual distortions, and then playing around with it, seeing what works based on your week and what you want to be doing and what your intention is with the medicine. Because that's something that for me is crucial, is having your intention set before you engage with the medicine. Mm-hmm. And, the Dr. Joe, where your attention goes, your energy flows.
Yep.
And so as you set your intention, you're priming your consciousness on what you want to focus on with the expanded awareness that the medicine will bring you to.
Mm-hmm. Before we wrap up here, I know you covered a lot of it, but what are some of the most important things to look for in set and setting? Obviously, community here, all these amazing men here. What else?
Being in nature, checking in with your intuition. Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel safe sitting with the medicine?
That's a big one. Do I feel safe?
Do I feel safe? Do I feel comfortable? Do I feel in a good mood? Perhaps I woke up and it's my microdosing day, but I'm feeling low energy. I'm feeling like ugh, I don't want to do it. And that may not be the best place to go into with the medicine, because it's a non-specific amplifier. It will amplify whatever mood you may be in. And so just checking in with yourself. How am I feeling today? What are my thoughts? What are my emotions? What am I most present to just in my general experience of life? And so in checking in, you can ask yourself, do I feel good with sitting with the medicine today? Do I feel good with connecting with psilocybin? And you can get a yes or no answer typically if you ask yourself a direct question.
Yeah, I want to dive a little bit deeper on that, because I've found for myself personally, and also the clients I work with, a lot of times guys especially can have difficulty understanding their intuition, and usually because we're more analytical. So what are some ways that we can tap into our intuition and understand if it's a yes or a no?
This is a practice from Shaman Durek's book, Spirit Hacking. And he is I believe, 5th generation Haitian shaman. And the practice is priming intuition. And so you ask yourself the question, you take a breath, close your eyes, ground, and check in and say, body, show me what a yes feels like. And I get this pulse coming up from my left hip up to my throat and then back down. It's like a bouncing ball. So I just name that. That's my yes. Then take another deep breath. Body, show me what a no feels like. And I get this emptiness right around my root. Body, is it in my highest and greatest purpose to connect with psilocybin in this microdose today? And I got that bounce from my left hip up to my throat, back down to my right hip. So, based on my intuition, I'm going to microdose today.
Awesome. Nate, where can people find out more about your microdosing course if they're...
My website, Innate Flow, INNATE flow.co, and my Instagram, innate.flow. My microdosing program will be launching the early July timeframe. So my program goes through these different aspects that we discussed: building sacred relationship with the medicine, learning how to create an optimal environment for healing the core wounds, your trauma, for having increased levels of self-awareness and ownership over your life so that you can be in full alignment with your soul and live your dream.
You also have a breathwork album.
I do have a breathwork album.
We didn't talk about breathwork, but you facilitated breathwork this morning before the ice, and your amazing music, the drumming during Pat's meditation. Where can people find that? So my album, my debut breathwork album, which I am incredibly proud of. It's fantastic, by the way. I bought it. I've listened to it many times. I've had different people reach out to me, be like, I've done this for like 10 days in a row. I just feel so honored that people have like first bought it and then actually done it consistently. Yeah, so I created a challenge for the crew where it was do breathwork every single day. Yeah. And it was awesome for a week.
Incredible. So that can be found on my Bandcamp page, which is linked in my Instagram. So just go to my link tree in my Instagram bio, and it's right there at the top. You can buy it. It's $11.11. And this is the first of many breathwork albums that I have been producing. I've been leaning into my music production this year. It's something that I'm really honing, and that in tandem with breathwork it really feels like a potent aspect of my mission and my work in combination with psychedelics. Because breath, though we didn't get into it deeply, is another potent aspect of connecting with our true self.
Yes.
And with source. So
yes.
I'm very grateful for you mentioning that, for you creating this container in which we can all connect with the medicine, with the breath, with the cold, and with ourselves as in our true masculine essence. So thank you, brother.
Thank you. And the breath work can also help potentiate the...
Certainly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're ready because these have been charging in the Lila quantum block and getting some good positive quantum energy in there. Nate, anything else we should know? Anything you want to leave us with before we get into this ceremony and breathwork session?
Yeah, giving yourself grace and giving others grace is a big part of understanding our own capacity, because we can get caught up in our own conceptions of ourself, of our ego, and what we think we're supposed to be doing, and thinking that others are right or wrong, and that is a projection of our own experience. So when we reel everything back into the moment, into presence, we're able to take ownership of the here and now, which is really all we have. So
indeed it is. All right, Nate, thank you for
brother.
coming on.
Yeah, man.
Ready? Live the captain's lifestyle.
Woo-wee.
Peace.